Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Dr. Lola Adeyemo. I am excited to host today's episode of the Workplaces That Work Conversations. So, if you've joined my ERG resource sessions before, that has been happening for a couple of years now. This is not changing. This is expanding and deepening the focus of these conversations. I'm still an employee resource group specialist. I partner with organizations to launch, redesign, and support the ERG ecosystem within their organization. So I work with organizations across different industries, specifically around employee resource group, um, developing and activating those groups and optimizing the systems within which they work to ensure that the individuals working within these spaces are supported and the organization as well. So if you've been in this space, we have a couple of communities, the All Things ERG monthly calls. That's still happening. If you are not joining that, watch the comments for details. I'll drop it in there. But we meet every month. But the focus of these Workplaces That Work conversations is to host niched discussions around various topics as it relates to ERG leaders, ERG design, ERG support within the organization. And so today I want to talk a little bit about ERG leadership, such a timely time to be having these, depending on your organization. ERG leadership has term limits. And so when those terms are restarting, always a great time to talk about ERG leadership. But before we get into that, I think it's important to start with, what does ERG leadership mean? I talk about the people side of ERGs a lot because we make references for people that are looking from the outside into like the ERG world. When we talk about ERGs, there are multiple layers to the people involved, right? A lot of times we use terms like ERG members, ERG participants, the people that show up for specific ERG events. Some people show up to multiple ERG events, right? So when we say ERG leadership, this refers to the people that have stepped into the roles in charge of managing single ERGs and programs, right? So a lot of organizations design that to be at least two people. So you always have a co-lead at the minimum, right? For organizations with larger ERGs, sometimes the ERG leadership team also includes some specific leadership roles. So there is a marketing lead, there is a philanthropic lead, right? There could be specific roles. So these are the people that are involved in the day-to-day planning of the ERG programs, designing, running, tracking, maybe getting funds, right, from the leadership and organizing, coming up with concepts and ideas for the program. So the ERG leadership. Of course, we have the ERG. I use the term ERG oversight managers. Some companies call them ERG program managers. The people responsible for managing a group of ERGs, right? So ERG leadership is still part of their role, but they are managing more than one ERG. And what happens is most organizations don't have a single person in that, a full-time head count in that role. And I think, it usually falls on somebody who has another full-time role around inclusion within the organization. And then a portion of their day-to-day job includes managing the ERG. So those are ERG program managers. And so for people that are not involved with ERGs, seeing them within the company, when they talk about leading the ERGs, that's somebody that is overseeing the ERG programs, overseeing all the ERGs, and the level might look very different depending on the organization. But I also like to touch on the executive level support, the leadership support for each ERGs. So most organizations that have it well designed also have somebody at the higher level within the organization, at the executive level, that is the executive sponsor for these ERGs, right? And so different roles, but also very significant. And of course, we have ambassadors and operational leads. Again, depending on how the organization is structured, some ERGs are designed to almost like pairing them with mentor leaders who guide them in their ERG role. So it could be the executive sponsor, it could be an operational director level leader who is helping them with how to run the meetings, how to get the best out of the meetings for the members, how to brainstorming with them around designing of these programs. So ERG leadership sometimes is loosely used for anyone that is involved with ERGs, but for the purpose of this conversation, I'm speaking to both the ERG leaders, the people actively managing specific ERG groups, and the people responsible for supporting these ERG leaders. So two parts audience and different points. And you know why in a minute, because when we talk about ERG leadership and the kind of evolution that happens when people take on this role, that's where this conversation is going to go. And so I'll move on to the ERG leadership lifecycle, because that's really the crux of our conversation today. ERG leaders typically experience one of three parts. When people step up to run ERGs, either in a volunteer capacity or the organization pays them something, right? Like gives them some compensation or unpaid volunteer, 100% volunteer role, right? There's usually a lot of passion involved, right? You have to care about the group or be passionate enough about the group that you stepped up into that role. And so sometimes organizations have a process to bring in a new lead and is outlined. Sometimes the person that is leading kind of started that ERG at the organization, right? Making the case and then raising up their hand and then taking up the role of setting it up. And so depending on how the ERG started, we have an ERG leader. And a couple of things happen when employees step up to lead ERGs. As you can imagine, it is work, it is additional work above and beyond their day job. And I put it along three different framework of what happens. What happens when people step up to lead ERGs? A lot of times we hear about the growing out, and growing out is a phrase I'm using to represent what happens when an ERG leader finds, identifies, or is recognized externally through maybe they put together programs and now they have all this visibility, and then they find opportunities that are better suited to what they want and they leave the company. Actually, when I got into ERG work, that was some of the comments that we hear from leaders that were resistant to supporting ERGs at their company, and ERG leaders. The part of the feedback was that, well, we're setting them up to leave us. We're going to invest so much in them, but then they're going to be having all this exposure, and then they're going to leave our company. Well, my response is always first. Everyone is free to leave. People leave companies all the time, but what message are they taking away from your organization when they leave? And so if you can shape their experience to where they take a positive message of your organization out of the organization, they ultimately will attract other employees or attract customers, right? So they are going out with a messaging. So the fear of people are going to leave shouldn't be a reason why we don't develop people or why we don't support people or mentor people. And so again, three things usually happen when when people step up and take ERG roles. They grow out of the company. The second one is they grow in, right? So exposure, visibility to other opportunities within the organizations. And so they switch roles in their day job. They find opportunities that are better aligned. And I think that's a good thing as well. In addition to finding opportunities outside of the company that works for them, if they find something within your organization, that's actually a very sweet and strong spot for you, because here is somebody that is passionate and has gone above and beyond with their time to do the work to support your ERGs, employee engagement, and employee experience, and they chose to stay, right? So I think that's the most positive of it, the one that we ideally maybe we want as an organization, as a leader. And then the third one is the one we often don't talk about, right? So they burn out or maybe crash out is a better way to put it. And initially, when I was going to start this conversation, I talked to a couple of ERG leaders, and this was going to be like a panel discussion, a roundtable discussion. And there was a lot of concern about speaking out on the negative side of their experiences with ERGs. And I think rightfully so. A lot of times when that crash out or burnout impact of leading an ERG happens, people don't necessarily want to say that out loud, right? You just want to move on, go and get a grip on yourself, focus on your career. And that's sad because I think you're losing people when people invest their time and their passions in something, into a program within your organization that is really helping you. There is so much opportunity. There's so much they can bring. There's so much they can drive that will be really helpful for your organization. So, are we? I'll kind of take each one of those three, right? When we talk about ERG leadership, the growing out portion, right? So again, leaders that are resistant sometimes will cite that as a reason why they don't want to invest too much on developing ERG leaders is, and they're going to leave. What happens that supports the grow out outcome of the ERG leader experience? First, the visibility is increasing, right? Depending on what kind of programs your ERGs are working on, it could be just the internal piece, it could be the nonprofit partnerships, the community programs, right? Yeah, that's awesome. ERG leaders are gaining visibility. Executive exposure also increases. I mean, my path through ERG consulting started with being a part of ERGs, an active member of ERGs. There's a lot of exposure. I think ERGs gave me my first round of having to do presentations to senior leadership with so much fear, and then telling myself, okay, what's the worst that could happen? Like they'll kick me out of the ERG leadership role. I still have my job, right? So having to present to an executive leader, I have so many memories of how scared I was and how I was able to carry that passion through and accomplish my goal with those conversations with executive leaders within the organization. So there's a lot of visibility. Yes, executive exposure internally within the organization also grows, and strategic leadership growth for the leaders. Now, when you appoint these ERG leaders, when people step into this role, they come in with different experience level with leadership. A lot of times, the people leading ERGs might not be people leaders, and maybe they are not IX executive level as well. They might be individual contributors within the organization doing amazing work, often very efficient in their functional role, in their day job. So this is all new. But regardless of how you stage your ERGs, how you design your systems, your ERG leaders are growing just because of that intentional decision to lead an ERG. There's growth happening in those individuals, right? And so if you haven't designed your organizational systems to capture the talent pipeline, that growth is moving outward, right? So think about it. Your ERG leaders are growing. Regardless of how your systems, your programs are set up, regardless of how your culture currently works, if people raise up their hands to do this work within your organization, they are developing themselves. How have you positioned your talent pipeline, your internal mobility system, your internal hiring process to capture these talents before they leave, before they walk out the door, right? So just knowing and recognizing that that is going to happen is a call to action for leaders. So if you are listening, if you are watching these, have you seen ERG leaders leave your organization? Have you seen ERG leaders leave after their terms? Have you seen a lot of outward movement of ERG leaders after they step off their role? What did succession look like? Drop it in the chat. I would love to get some feedback, get some good conversation going as you watch these. What do you have in place in your organization to capture the talent that you are developing through ERG leadership pipeline? All right. So the second part of this is the growth internally. So again, if people are doing these roles and they are gaining visibility, they can focus on outside, and they'll get poached, right? Like, there are organizations and recruiters and leaders that are now looking for that experience as a proof of leadership experience. So even if someone does not have on their resume that, I have a people manager role, if they have resume, LinkedIn profile experience that speaks to active ERG leadership and active ERG engagement, that's a different set of trigger for external recruiters. So organizations are being attracted to that, and they are hiring people with ERG experience. And so, what about internal growth, right? Promotions, right? The people that are stepping up to lead ERGs, there's a lot of promotion opportunities that would happen. There's a lot of understanding how to ask for promotions, understanding how to position yourself for the next role, for the next level of your career. There's a lot of cross-functional experience. There's a lot of leadership without influence happening within your organization for these ERG leads, right? ERG work is building real muscle that you need within your organization. And if you are not setting this up correctly, promotions happen, and then people have different roles that have different requirements. And so they need to step away from ERG leadership because of all of the changes that have happened. So, again, how are you being prepared for that? How are you putting in place plans and succession plans so that your ERGs is not being carried on the shoulders of one person? For example, like, yeah, passion alone can only go so far, but passion is not going to sustain your structures and your systems. How are you providing and capturing, maybe that's the word, capturing the knowledge, the experiences that the ERG leaders bring, the perspectives that they bring, because another part of the ERG conversation is that ERG experience is not a monolith, right? So depending on how you structure your groups, there is still diverse perspectives within those groups. And so keeping the rotation going is actually good and healthy. Having the same ERG leaders lead your ERG for 4 or 5 years is not really helpful. You have to switch things around, bring new perspectives, new ideas, give it great opportunities for others to also step into these roles. So if someone gets promoted, if someone gets moved to a different role, if someone has to step away from the ERG, who replaces them, right? And how do you have those structured? So if you are in a role where you manage ERG leaders, you manage ERG programs, do you have a leadership bench ready? Right? Is it just that one person that carries that ERG? What is the plan when that person moves or that person takes a pause? Do your programs and everything you're doing pause? Right? So even though there's 2 co-lead positions, what is the plan to make sure that you have others in the pipeline who are ready to pick things up if a switch ever needs to happen? Now, the ERG leaders most times have term limits, and there's always a minimum a year. For most ERGs, there's a minimum of a year that is renewable by another year, and then the term limits kind of varies. On average, maybe 2 years. I think 2 years is also a very long term to commit to as an ERG leader right now. You don't know where your career will be next year. I mean, committing to leading the ERGs for the next 2 years is a decision you can make 100% at this point in time, right? So I always recommend, a year with the option of renewing for another year, and then maybe an option of moving to a different role, right? So it also makes it easy to attract people to fill your ERG leadership role. So just for those that are managing ERGs. But if you oversee ERGs, do you have a leadership bench already? It's not on one person. As the person responsible for managing the groups, there should be a plan in place, a developmental pipeline to make sure that there are people that are ready to step into this role when the time comes, right? If for any reason, the 1 or 2 people that are leading the ERGs have to step back. And there's also sort of strategies around staggering your ERG leadership term so that they are not leaving and switching at the same time. And so qualifications for picking who is in your ERGs, depending on their day job, to make sure that they are both not going to be like swamped at the same season during the calendar year for the organization. I think internal movement is good. Yeah, Chantel is dropping a comment about internal movement. Yes, I think it's great. And I think actually for me, I feel like that's the green flag. If your ERG leaders are stagnant, there's a problem. They should be moving, they should be growing, they should be getting promoted because there's so much they're gaining. It's almost like you have a pipeline in place, which is a good thing. So if you are an ERG leader who has internally grown, maybe that's going to be the next. Drop it in the chat. How have you seen your ERG leadership experience expand your role within your organization? How have you seen stepping into, if you've led ERGs before in the past for years, how did that make an impact on your career? And I think when we talk about growing out or growing in, this is where the difference also comes in, right? Because yes, stepping into an ERG leadership role might expose and create more awareness for you around this is where I want my career to go. And so, yeah, the change might be it has to be outside. I have to look elsewhere. But a lot of times, depending on the size of your organization, there are opportunities internally that when we hire people and they sit within functions, you just don't see what's going on at the organization level. First, if you're an ERG leader, it's a huge opportunity. Know where you plug in, know where you fit in to the chain of things within your organization. And I think ERGs, getting involved with ERGs at the leadership level and planning kind of exposes you to all that. You understand more of where, I'm not just a speck on the chain here. Where are my customers, internal customers coming from? And then where are my products moving to before it gets to the external customers? You are part of that process internally. And so sometimes when we are able to pull back and have this view of the entire organization, it also exposes us to here's an area that I want to expose my career. So if you're an ERG leader, and ERG leadership has shaped your career path, transition, growth, promotion within your organization, drop it in the chat, and hopefully it's going to help one or two people who are starting the ERG leadership path for the first time. All right. So there's a third part of this, and this is again the part that maybe we often don't all talk about enough, because when this happens, the victims, for lack of a better word, the victims of these, they don't want to talk. They're just like, I'm done. They want to step away, breathe, and just, I am stepping away from the ERG work because I am exhausted. And I think that's ERG leaders, that's the part of ERG leadership requires an emotional investment. Rightfully so. There is at the heart of it, we need to have people who care about inclusivity, who care about, uh, systemic changes, that care about the demographic or the group, depending on how your ERGs are categorized, right? You care enough. That's why you're there. That's why you go above and beyond and invest your time. But that also means that you are carrying a lot of emotional labor. There's a lot of invisible planning work and scheduling as an ERG leader. It's evening time. I had somebody ask me last week about that. Like, how do you plan for your ERG leaders' time? Is this something, when do they do the planning? When do they plan the program? Is this built into their day-to-day, or do they what is it called? Or do they do it during their lunchtime? And I was thinking about when I was an ERG leader, I do it in the evening. I do it when I get home. I do it whenever I can get a chance, right? Like, because during the day it's hard to do it because you're doing your day job and you're in meetings back to back, right? So at night, I care because I want it to happen. And so I block off some time in the evening and I am doing ERG stuff. Now, if you're a leader who is intentionally trying to design these experiences so that your leaders do not get burnt out, that's one of the areas you look at, is how to plan it into their time and give them blocks of time to work on ERG stuff. And I'm not talking about even the ERG program attendance, right? If you're leading an ERG, you need time to actually plan these programs, right? So that planning part, that's the invisible part that is happening. The time commitment, when it's not defined, it takes a whole lot of time. And once, people that step into these roles, once you've taken up a commitment, you want to see it through. You don't want to fail, right? So you put so much pressure on yourself, and there is not a lot of clarity on how much time I really need. I do whatever I need to do to get it done. And then there's that pressure that we also don't talk about, because no ERG is a representative of a monolithic group. There's so much diversity even within each group, right? And so there's that pressure as the ERG leader to represent an entire identity group. When guess what? None of these groups are actually the same, and the experiences of that I have as an ERG leader is going to still look different from a lot of my members. And so we carry that weight as ERG leaders. And then yes, there's a lot of applause around some things, but then there is no structure on what is the outcome or where is it going. Does my work even matter? Am I moving the needle in any way? So all of that, it's pulling more from the ERG leaders than they are actually seeing the results, right? And there's also the fact that a lot of these changes we think we are trying to make as ERG leaders, it's at the systemic level. It's not going to happen overnight. And so there is a gap between acknowledgement and appreciation for what I'm doing now and the impact that is actually making at my organization or for the communities. So burnout happens. Inevitably, that's what happens with ERG leaders. A lot of burnout, a lot of crash out, a lot of, I am done. I can't do anymore. I can't give anymore. But I just need a break, right? So I think that's the next prompt question. If you've ever felt stretched in an ERG role, what support would have made the biggest difference for you? So if you're listening, if you're watching these, think about your ERG leadership experience and think about some people that are listening that manage ERGs and some people that just stepped into new ERG leadership role. And so if you're able to share your own experience, and if you want to share that directly with me, just send it on DM and email is, what support would have made the biggest difference for you and your ERG leadership role, especially if you've experienced burnout or crash out as an ERG leader? All right. I'm looking forward to seeing some of those feedback and sharing it with my audience here, because I already know I have some. And again, when I started putting this live session together, it was meant to be a panel. But I also recognize the fact that there are three outcomes of this ERG leadership experience for leaders. There's the grow out, there's the grow in, there's the burnout. I didn't want to focus only on the first two, because usually the people that are gaining visibility, the people that are growing out, people that end up starting their businesses, that end up finding new career path because of their ERG experience, are usually a lot more vocal about it. But then the people that got burnt, the people that got stretched too thin, the people that felt like they wasted their time, they were not appreciated, and their health was impacted by ERG leadership. A lot of times we're having private conversations. These are not things that they're sharing out. And so I wanted to make sure the conversation was just even around the realities of what it really takes from your employees to lead your ERGs. So more to come on the outcome of the poll and the conversations and from people experiences across those different parts. But I want to wrap up with kind of tips for both audience. So for you, if you are managing ERGs, if you are designing ERG program, if your company is in the process of putting together ERG programs for the first time, or if you are that one person within your organization who's responsible for launching and managing the ERGs, what can you do? What can you do differently? And first, I'll start with the ERG leader. So if you are an ERG leader, you are in that role, you are thinking about being in that role, thank you for stepping up. Thank you for your time on investing your time and saying yes to the ERG leadership role. And there's a couple of things to share or for you to pay attention to. Number one is to clarify the scope. Right. So most organizations will have a job description or something that they give you. And depending on the level of advancement of the ERGs, there should be a description of, I'm stepping into this role. What does that mean? I'm not talking about because I'm a woman, you want me to lead the women ERG group. No, show me what this organization has put in place and defined as ERG leadership role, responsibilities, and descriptions, right? Of course, there are opportunities to kind of update that. So depending on the length of time, right, those documents do evolve to capture the realities of what they're really doing. But if the program has been around for a while, pay attention to what's the scope. Define the time boundaries. Again, having conversations around what kind of work am I supposed to do as an ERG leader? And if you are having to spend, on a side note about ERG tech, because I get asked questions around ERG tech a lot by companies that have huge ERGs. If your ERG is one of the ways you can immediately kind of tell if you're ready to go invest in tech or platform or building out your SharePoint page. If your ERGs are spending so much time doing the technical work outside of their own day job, right? There are some things that you can save time with by setting up the systems internally, right? So but as an ERG leader, this is where you need to share with your leadership, right? What are you spending your time doing? How are you doing this work? Document all the things that you are doing, all your contributions. Make sure you're capturing all the work you're actually putting in. Make sure you're capturing, tracking the time that you are spending on these things and the areas that you are spending your time on, right? Align with your sponsors. If you have executive sponsors, they're not just there to have their names on there. They are there to strategically support you. So this is where the feedback and the power play with an executive sponsor comes in. If there are things that you're struggling with, have those conversations, establish that communication line with your executive sponsors, and document the things you're doing. Also document the things that you're doing for yourself, for the organization, yes, so that you can showcase what you're doing, but also for yourself. Because I think part of where burnout begins to creep in for ERG leaders is there becomes a time when there's misalignment with what you're doing and what you signed up for and what you want to do, right? So this is all personal. If I signed up to be an ERG leader, what motivated you? What did you want to spend time doing? And what did you see yourself doing? And how that can contribute to your burnout if there's not an alignment with what you want to do and what you are actually doing. Because this is where you might be thinking about, should I switch roles within the ERGs? This is what I want to spend time on. And I'm not saying you have to spend time on doing exactly what you do your day job every single day. But if you are using these as a growth path, it could be, I want to spend time developing in this area. And being part of ERGs, this is an area that I want to work on. So document what you're spending your time doing and do that alignment check within yourself. Am I still doing what I want to do? Where is the bulk of my time going? And why am I getting tired of this? And if you need to exit, plan for your exit before you get to complete exhaustion as an ERG leader. You are not there to sacrifice yourself. You're leading ERGs, but listen to your own self. If you're getting exhausted, don't wait until you get burned out or you crash out. Take a break, step away, and take care of yourself. So for ERG managers, ERG program managers, oversight, if you're designing ERGs, one of the things, of course, is kind of referred to it since is descriptions. What are your ERG leaders responsible for? What are they, if you don't define that scope, what happens is they end up with everything on their plate, right? And there's not enough visibility to see that these ERG leaders are doing way more than what they are supposed to be doing, right? And so different term limits as well is a big part of this. How long do people spend in ERGs at your organizations? What is the term when they sign up? I've had ERGs that do 6-month terms. I've had those that do quarterly rotations just to avoid that crash out during certain seasons. Depending on the industry you're in, there might be certain seasons where certain groups of employees or departments will be busy. And I've seen those that do ERG leadership by programs. And I thought that was also interesting when I saw it, but it worked really well within that organization. It was, our ERGs are 4 different areas that they touch. And so our leaders are aligned to those pillars, as opposed to you are the ERG leader, you are responsible for everything with that ERG. Is how can you design those leadership roles so that it makes it easy for people to opt in, not get burnt out, and also get best value for themselves professionally. So define the limits and plan succession around ERGs. Plan for people to leave, right? And I think that's a whole bigger succession planning conversation. Actually, I'm going to be having a conversation in a couple of weeks with someone that does that with organizations, and we'll tie that to ERGs as well. But succession planning is a whole process by itself. So plan that for your ERGs as well. And then budget clarity. So that's always an open question. Do we have budgets? What are those budgets? How much is it? Do people have clarity on what the budgets are? Is it easy to access the budget? And then what are the things they can use it for? Right. So if you're designing ERG programs, if you're managing programs, put those kind of things in place. And then when you have executive sponsors, give them descriptions as well. Let them know what they are there for and tap into them. Right. So if you are an ERG manager, have clarity on that. Make sure that your sponsors are people that you can tap into for different things, so it doesn't all fall on the ERG leaders. I think the summary of these, if you're an ERG leader, ERG manager, I would love to hear your experience with your ERG role, the pros, the cons, and then the advice that you have for people that are stepping into ERG roles. But ERGs are not extracurricular activity, right? It's three things to emphasize. It's a leadership laboratory, right? It's some one of the things that we most often miss about ERG leadership is that ERG leaders are growing. So ERG leadership is a leadership laboratory. It's a culture signal, right? ERGs don't exist in silos. They exist within this whole ecosystem. And a lot of times, if these things are happening within your ERG leadership team, right, it's a signal that is probably happening within your organization as a whole, because it's responding to what's normalized within your organization. So it's a signal for what your culture looks like. But then we often miss the fact that ERG leadership is also a talent pipeline. So how are you plugging in your ERGs into the talent team, the talent strategy within your organization? So as an ERG manager, ERG leader, DEI leader who is looking to incorporate ERGs into their overall strategy as an organization, what's one shift your organization could make to better support your ERG leaders today? I would love to hear from you if you want to brainstorm that. But even if this just gives you something to think about, to look at the experiences your ERG leaders are, I hope you walk away making the experiences better for your ERGs, because ultimately it's going to impact your culture, and ultimately your employees grow, they stay, and they stay engaged. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for your comments. Keep them coming. Keep monitoring the chat. Workplaces that work don't just launch employee resource groups. They design the ecosystem to support these leadership roles. Thank you.